Once again, coming up from Team Trident, they really seem to dislike playing against Invoker, and the reason why is, especially in the 8.3 patch onward, well, it's ever since 8.2, plus Exiled Invoker has been seeing a huge resurgence to the ability of him to just be able to globally participate in gaps across the map, which is something that a lot of other greedy mids such as Zeus really also excel at. Invoker, when he is drafted in higher level competitive games, you tend to see him actually run as a safe lane farmer in the tri lane. The reason for that is if you go for a plus Exiled Invoker, once he gets level 2 Exiled, he's actually very self-sufficient. He's going to have more base damage than any offlaner he's going to be laned against. Maybe the exception of the Tide Hunter because he's got the Anchor Smash, but even then he should be able to bully him out of lane just with sheer right-click damage. And the advantage of having that Invoker in that safe lane is he can globally participate with that Sunstrike. This is the biggest weakness of Invoker. Is A, he's very bottle inefficient. You should probably never go bottle Invoker, there's no real good reason to do so. He doesn't get enough benefit for it to be worthwhile. And the additional weakness of the Invoker is he's actually the greediest mid hero in the game. Him and Shadow Fiend, they're the mid heroes that are just going to sit there in that mid lane. They're not going to do anything until they eventually get enough items that you're ready to fight. But by that point, unless of course if you're forcing the Invoker to fight with the rest of his team, at that point when you have those items, so for Invoker's case, if you go across Exalt, the most common build in the competitive scene is the Zoo Invoker build, where you want to go for the Necronomicon 3 as soon as possible. If you can get it by the 23-minute mark, you're in declared to really take control again, just because you've got the double Forge Spirits with 4 points in quas, as well as the Necronomicon Warrior and Archer, so you pretty much perma-stun somebody in place. The Necro 3 Warrior will actually out-DPS most heroes until about the 30-minute mark, just because it's got 1 base attack time, and he actually burns more mana than an anti-mage, with 75 per swing. So Trident Esports also looking to ban out the Doombringer, opening with the Skywrath Mage first pick. This is something that KQT, their captain and drafter, he really does love that Skywrath as the first pick, because it doesn't really give away much of your draft. Skywrath is pretty much a Swiss Army knife. He works with basically every other support hero in the game. You can run him as a greedy of 4 if you pick up an even more item independent hero than him. Otherwise, he could be the one that's buying wards, buying courier, dealing with all the support stuff, because he's still able to contribute a massive amount of damage, as well as provide that lockdown potential with the Ancient Seal. Croutons actually going for a Necrophos first time, which has become quite a popular trend in the 8.2 era, just due to the fact that Necrophos, well, he's a hero that's very powerful in the early game and in the mid game. He's actually very weak in the late game unless he's incredibly farmed, but he excels in the ultra late game. If the game ever goes late enough that you're talking 6 slots, so a game can be won or lost at the buyback stage, Necrophos being able to disable buyback and add 30 seconds, so taking somebody out of the game for about 2 minutes, it's enough for you to instantly win or lose a game. Necrophos in the early game also gives you the massive advantage of every time you scythe someone, that's a free tower. A 30-second cooldown on the respawn counter, that's enough for you to be able to take an objective successfully. Also means that you could choose to even take another fight if you've got a very scrappy lineup. Say for instance, if you've got a Wisp to synergize well with the Necrophos, which is something that Team Secret, they're the ones that first introduced that duo, and in that case you actually don't go for any points in status, you just go for Heartstopper Aura, just because you have the regen potential from Wisp, so it actually gives you an absurd amount of damage. Faceless Void first pick coming up from Croutons, as well as a Vengeful Spirit. Venge currently the most trending support hero, aside from the Skywrath Mage. So I suppose a little bit ironic that the two most commonly picked heroes, usually on the opposite sides, is the Skywrath and the Vengeful Spirit, owing to their lore. And Faceless Void still is considered to be first pick, first ban. Not so much ban, but he is picked up fairly often in the first picking stage. The weakness of Faceless Void is he's actually being nerfed almost to the ground. Chronosphere no longer disables passives, so Team Trident, they do have the option of picking up somebody like a Phantom Assassin who could laugh in Void's face with that blow. Even though he freezes time, he still somehow can't hit her. Not really too sure how that works out, but Void, much like Doombringer, losing the ability to disable passives has dealt basically a significant blow to their overall win rate because it decreases the efficiency of the hero. Void, whenever he's picked, he's forced to be a 1 position. Before in the 8.1 and 8.2 era, you could actually opt to go for Void in the offlane or even in the mid lane role, and the reason behind that is because Void has got fantastic level 1 stats. He's actually probably got one of the best level 1 stats in the game in terms of everything. He's got good strength, he's got good agility, he's got fantastic armor and base damage, which is often a critical factor. And Team Trident opting to go Phantom Assassin. Unfortunately, it's not going to be Mule, who is the 19th best Phantom Assassin player on Dota buff. I think it might have fluctuated since the last I've checked, but it's going to be played by Venado, who is the 1 position player as Mule. Fortunately, he can't put on the big boy carry pants. He's going to be shuttled down to the offlane role. We now have a Viper ban coming up from Team Trident, and Viper's a fantastic ban when you decide to draft a melee core like a Phantom Assassin. Phantom Assassin doesn't get the short end of the stick as much as other melee cores, but Viper's ability just to hit somebody with the Viper Strike, you can't purge it off, you can't block it, nothing will prevent you from getting Viper Strike apart from if you actually disjoint yourself from the game. So for instance, past phase shift, you can use yourself, or if you've got the Shadow Demon on your team, you can disrupt them. Otherwise, you're just going to cripple Phantom Assassin's mobility, and Phantom Assassin that doesn't have mobility is basically dead just because she is so heavily dependent on being able to dart in and out on these fights, utilizing the phase mobility, since phase boots tend to be the preferred boot choice on the Phantom Assassin, in conjunction with the blink strikes. You can also blink your allies. Phantom Assassin, when she is picked up, usually is run in the mid lane. She's actually a pretty mediocre one, owing to the fact that Coup de Grace at level 1 is only about a 19.5% increase in overall DPS, so that actually puts it as a fairly ineffective crit. Coup de Grace actually becomes viable as a crit once you hit level 2. I believe from that point it goes to about 35%ish, so that's equivalent to a level 4 Juggernaut Blade Dart. So that's the point when Phantom Assassin actually starts to hit very hard. Phantom Assassin in the mid lane also has a massive advantage of being a hit level 6 very early on. So even though Coup de Grace isn't a very powerful crit, the fact that you get it so early on, the fact that a lot of enemy supports just won't have the HP pool, the armor pool to really be able to deal with Phantom Assassin blink critting you in the face, makes her an incredibly powerful hero in that mid stage. And she's a carry hero that can actually fight very early on. Just with phase drum, Phantom Assassin can pretty much is ready to get good to go. You can go for the greedier Battle Fury route, but personally I'm not a big fan of Battle Fury on Phantom Assassin. It doesn't actually give her enough benefit for it to be considered a worthwhile pick, unless if the game is going to the ultra late games, we're talking 50, 60-ish minute point, where the crit cleave actually could be a critical factor, just due to the fact that you never want to build Battle Fury on a hero that's not going to make good use of it. Battle Fury is never a fighting item, it's always a farming item. So if you don't have a hero like an anti-mage that can actually make good use of the Battle Fury, it's a waste of about 4,350 gold that you could have otherwise spent finishing much more effective items that will let you fight early on, such as phase drums, and so even something like a Helmet Dominator tends to be a very powerful build order on the Phantom Assassin, because it gives you the viability of the game going late, since you could stack and clear out Ancients to clear out later on, you could upgrade into a Satanic, and Lifesteal tends to be the most powerful unique attack modifier in the Phantom Assassin. We've now got a Phoenix ban. Phoenix is another very powerful hero to deal with the PA. Since in the laning phase, you can constantly poke and proc the Fiery Spirits, makes it very difficult for PA to be able to find farm. PA is actually an incredibly fragile hero. The Fiery Spirit spam actually stacks up quite heavily. Looks like we are going to be seeing what appears to be, for now, an offlane puck drafted by Team Trident. They do have a lot of flexibility with both of their cores that they've drafted so far. We've got a Death Prophet being picked up by Croutons. So puck instantly picked up in response to the Death Prophet, one of the best counters to a Death Prophet in the mid lane matchup, because you have to phase shift to disjoint the Crypt Swarm. Very easy to anticipate the Crypt Swarm since Death Prophet has to wave her hands around. Death Prophet used to be considered first pick, first ban. I believe she had something about a 55-56% win rate in the vast majority of tournaments in the competitive scene, just due to the fact that every time Exorcism is up, you group up and fight, you take a tower, the enemy team, they can't really do anything about it, unless if they could initiate on Death Prophet, pick her off and kill her before the Exorcism could do a lot of work, before she could even get it off. She will just walk over your entire team. She provides you the same amount of team fight as a hero like a Luna, also forces the enemy team to throw everything you had at her, otherwise your team's going to get destroyed by the Exorcism. But unlike a Luna, she's always going to be building utility items as well as items that boost her survivability, making it very difficult for you to kill her. And she's also going to be she's also a very effective laning hero, unlike Luna, who tends to be fairly suboptimal in 1v1 matchups. With the Queen of Pain ban, as Queen of Pain counters Shadow Fiend in lane as well as in the later stages, because especially with the Sonic Wave reworks, and now it does pure damage and pierces through spell immunity. Shadow Fiend, a very fragile glass cannon hero. He's pretty much a definition of the glass cannon. Queen of Pain will tear him apart. So with the Phantom Assassin, Puck, and Shadow Fiend, Puck is going to be the offlane hero. Shadow Fiend will be sent mid, and Phantom Assassin most likely will be the safe lane farmer. Ideally, you want to send Puck against Death Prophet, since Death Prophet against Shadow Fiend is really a skill-dependent matchup in a vacuum, assuming there's no rotations and both players are even. Death Prophet actually has the upper hand, just because you, although that being said, it's actually a bit of it's a 60-40 matchup to the Death Prophet. If you get past level 3 and if you don't have too many denies under your belt, the Shadow Fiend will actually start to outpace you, but from level 1 to level 2, it should be a 60-40 matchup to the Death Prophet, assuming skill. Both players are equally skilled, just because you hit a lot harder on the Death Prophet, although that's offset by the fact that you've actually got terrible front swing on the animation. I think it's something like 0.6 or 0.7 before the animation actually flies. So looking at the bans over from Team Crouton, they've banned out the Ancient Apparition Tide, Brew, and the Ogre. Ogre and the Ancient Apparition, probably unnecessary bans, just due to the fact that Ogre's been nerfed to the ground. The fact that his stun's now 475 has pretty much killed his competitive viability. The only way you could lane an Ogre now would have to be as an offlane hero, and even then, he's not that great, just due to the fact that he's so heavily dependent on positioning. He's a very slow hero, and he's got a very high cast point. Has been reduced to, I think, it's 0.46 now instead of 5.4, which it used to be. So it means he can use his abilities even if he's under battery assault, which before he couldn't. But the fact that his stun range has dropped from 600 to 475 has killed his competitive viability. Ancient Apparition support hero, it's not worthy to be caught in the first banning stage. You almost always want to ban him in the second or third. And often, Ancient Apparition, you only abandon if you have a carry hero that suffers heavily against an AA, such as for instance a Morphling. Being able to disable Morph could pretty much win you the game. And Ancient Apparition has been seeing some actions in the competitive scene as a counter to Tidehunter, but since Croutons have banned out both AA and Tide, and the reason of course why you want to pick up AA against Tide is Kraken Shell doesn't account for magic damage, and the chilling touch that AA is able to provide really does cut through the Kraken Shell. The Tidehunters, it doesn't really trigger it, and provides you that burst damage you need to get to finish them off very early on. So we are going to be seeing a Skywrath Mage Earthshaker support duo, very powerful support duo because you've got the concussive shot to make it very easy to line up with the Fissure Block. You also have a good mix of defensive capability with Earthshaker being able to provide a lot of support from the back line. While Skywrath Mage is able to get a little bit closer, front line a massive amount of damage. Both these heroes have a massive area of influence. Earthshaker has a potential range of 1300, Skywrath has got 1600 with the concussive shot. So these heroes synergize well at every stage of the game. You also have the fact that you've got one hero that provides a lot of damage, one hero that provides a lot of lockdown. While over on the boys and Croutons, I've actually opted to go for the Leshrac in conjunction with the Venge. The weakness of the support duo is the fact that Venge, her fundamental weakness is she's got 290 movement speed and her stun range is 500. So Venge, you never want to initiate with a Venge unless if you're smoke rotating, but you never want to depend on something as unreliable as a smoke. You always want to account for player error, both on your side and on the enemy teams. So it's the reason why when you draft a Venge, you usually draft her with somebody that could initiate the stun. She's there for the follow-up, as well as the defensive capability. The nice thing is, if you do get able to close the distance to get that Magic Missile, you've got a very powerful 1-2 combo. Magic Missile into the Split Earth coming out from Leshrac. Split Earth is 120 damage at level 1. It's probably one of the most cost-effective nukes in the game, as far as damage as well as CC ability. So if you are able to get that combo off, it's fantastic, but the issue is most players aren't going to let the Venge get up close to be able to hit them with that Magic Missile. So it means the only way you can reliably get that stun off in time for you to execute your combo is if you use a smoke. And speaking of smokes, looks like Mac Cheesums is going to be the 5 position player on the Venge, starting with Smoky to C. We've also got Cherry, going to be the 4 as Leshrac will take farm priority over pretty much every other support hero, just because he's scale very well as far as items concerned. Nova Lau going to be the mid as the Death Prophet. They are going in against Gatekeeping. Gatekeeping could be actually taking a death as the 4. We actually don't see a stun flying out so far. Actually, Cherry could actually be the 1, as I didn't notice the Witch Doctor before. Gatekeeper should be taking a death there, one more right click. And looks like Mushin no Shin, he's actually going to be the 4. CSC Cherry should be the 1. It should be actually, not really too sure how they're going to land this. It looks like this is going to be an offline Void with a tri-lane with the Leshrac. So K picking up 2 kills in quick succession. Overcommitment coming in from both Trident Esports. Very rare to see a misplay like that coming out from them. Nova Lau fortunately has burned out a good chunk of regen. Looks like Mule is going to be resuming his role as the mid lane Phantom Assassin. It's a very interesting lane coming out from the boys in Trident. So we are going to be seeing a tri-lane Shadow Fiend with a mid lane Phantom Assassin. Phantom Assassin against Death Prophet. Death Prophet has to try to win the lane as much as possible in the early stages. Otherwise, PA becomes too difficult to control because Death Prophet, her base damage, while it is high, the fact that you have to compensate for animation. Phantom Assassin, while she's got low base damage, fantastic animation, so she actually does have quite a large advantage in that regard. You've also got the fact that with Stifling Dagger, it's hard to deny the Phantom Assassin. Once she picks up level 2, level 3 Stifling Dagger, we do see a potential gank attack, but with no concussive shot, just a point in the Arcane Bolt. Looks like we are going to be seeing actually a dual lane coming out from the boys and Trident. Very aggressive Observer Ward in place. Not only prevents the possibility of them going for Ancients without the boys and Trident being aware of it, also means that you do have a vision of rotations coming in from the aggressive tri-lane from the boys on Team Crouton, as we are going to be seeing a 1 position Leshrac. Very interesting core position here in the draft. The advantage of that 1 position Leshrac is he hits his peak very early on. You've got a very powerful Death Ball pushing runner with both the Death Prophet as well as Leshrac. You've got the Split Earth to be the burst down heroes in that tri-lane because you've got 3 stuns in that lane. Cask into Magic Missile into the Split Earth, which is what I'm assuming they're going to do, just because Cask has 600 range, although it's got a very low projectile speed. So Witch Doctor as well. Not really a hero you want initiating, but I mean, because you've got the Venge, so you've got that guaranteed follow through, not going to be the worst thing in the world. Actually fairly effective, so long as you get the boots advantage on them, or so long as they don't get boots too quickly. So we're actually going to be seeing a dual lane with Venado as well as Gatekeeper. So Earthshaker, as far as the laning stage is concerned, he's basically a ranged hero. He's never going to be going for creeps just because as a support, you're not going to be going for creeps to begin with. And he's just going to be hanging back, waiting for them to jump on the Shadow Fiend, and then he's going to come in from the side with that Fissure. Looks like Mushin no Shin, he was actually able to pick up that bounty rune. This is something that a lot of teams have been paying a lot more attention to. The reason why you've got that bounty rune change is to encourage more engagements at the 0-second mark, which is what we saw earlier. So it's why teams now tend to prioritize getting those bounty runes, because it does actually give you quite a substantial advantage. We actually see KQT being given the lane to himself While Mule goes to pick up that double damage rune. There's a ping coming in from KQT. He wants to go for a gank, just because Mule does have that double damage rune. Looks like over the top lane while that's happening, without ever being ganked upon. Carolus and casters there. Magic Missile is used earlier. One more right click with the Wave of Terror should be enough, and now it's going to be taking a death. But while that happens, Novalau actually looks like no gank attempts happening in the mid lane. So Mule holding on to that rune for now. Got that double damage at the ready. Skywrath Mage actually off to a fairly good start. Level 3 Skywrath Mage this early on, especially in conjunction with the Phantom Assassin. So the dual lane is designed just to shut down the Death Prophet. Since Death Prophet's biggest weakness is she is incredibly item dependent, so she offsets that weakness by having a very powerful laning stage. But once you throw in more than one hero, and you're facing against it as a Death Prophet, it becomes very difficult for her to do well in that lane. Because it means that the only way she can reliably find farm is just by throwing out that Crypt Swarm, especially when you're constantly being zoned by the Skywrath Mage. Although the weakness of Skywrath Mage now, with the fact that his Agi's been nerfed by quite a significant amount, he's going to have 0 armor until he picks up level 8, I believe, is when he gets his first point in armor. So that means that if Novalau wants, he could just actually stand his ground, right-click Skywrath Mage, deal a fair amount of damage, and then try to follow through with that Crypt Swarm to finish him off. It forces KQT to instantly back off, otherwise risk death. McCheesums and Mushin no Shin standing actually are smoke rotating. They're contemplating going back into the top lane, but now we have formed that tri lane. Most likely will be going to the mid lane. That would be their most fruitful gank target. Also notice Mushin no Shin going for the conventional Witch Doctor build. Often go for a point in Voodoo Restoration. This smoke rotation should actually be spotted out now by the boys in Trident, just because they did see that haste rune get grabbed. But while that's happening, Cherry going to get eating a fair amount of stun damage. A Gatekeeper actually should be taking death though. Cherry's keeping himself alive for now. Voodoo Restoration is not going to be enough. Gatekeeper takes a death. Bernardo going balls deep just to ensure he can get that Q raise. The McCheesums with that haste rune should be the disengage fund. So they trade support in exchange for his Tor Trident. Because they are playing from behind, not going to be very happy with that trade. Any trade's a good trade when you're playing from behind, so long as you don't lose an objective, just because you are going to be receiving more experience and more gold per kill. So even if you do lose 3 for 2, sorry, if the enemy team's ahead. Speaking of which, McCheesum should be taking a death, and the Archangel took me enough, KQT, fortunately overcommitting for that. So you trade support for support once again. Cherry's able to pick up a very easy kill. He's actually opting to forego any point in Split Earth, and instead of going for a Diabolical Edict and a Lightning Storm build. Very unconventional. You usually see Leshrac players forego Lightning Storm, or you see them forego Diabolic Edict. You don't see this bizarre combination of W and E, just because if you go for the Diabolic Edict build, you usually go Split Earth Diabolic Edict. Since Split Earth does scale very nicely, it does do an absurd amount of damage, and that way if you land the stun, you've got the follow through to ensure you can actually get that Diabolical Edict pulse damage off. Otherwise you go for Lightning Storm and the Split Earth, since you could use Lightning Storm now that it has that snare to set up for the Split Earth. By going for both, you don't really have a way to guarantee you getting the Diabolical Edict damage off. You also don't guarantee you being a survivor man fight against them, because Leshrac, despite his absurd damage potential, is very fragile. So they can just keep hitting you, even if they die in the process, because you're trading 1 for 1, they're going to get the experience from killing you. Always going to work out in their favor, unless of course you're able to clean up a spree kill. Venado actually playing very far forward, considering he's got no support there. As KQT now roaming all across the map, going to the bottom lane to put a little bit of pressure onto K, who is going for the correct facing forward offlane build, maxing out that time loss, since it gives him the vast majority of his damage. Looks like Gatekeeper stole the bounty room right from McCheesum's face. McCheesum not going to be too happy, didn't even stun him, so he decided not to waste the mana. Actually hasn't dropped one of his wards or either of his sentries. So we've got a safety ward coming up from the Radiant side. It's very interesting considering they went for an aggro try. Usually when you're clashing tri lane or you want to clash against that safe lane, you want to place a ward there. That way you can spot support rotations coming in. That way you know exactly where the supports are. Support's going to pull, you know you can dive against the carry. The Gatekeeper, fantastic Fission Block, actually saves his bacon, make sure they can't chase through, maybe look for it to go for a kill attempt there. The nice thing about the Lightning Storm build, the fact that he opted not to go for the Splitter, is I suppose you do have that spam ability. Since Lightning Storm is basically a superior Lightning Arc, does everything Lightning Arc does without losing damage. Actually coded the exact same way, just looks different. Looks like Jellysickle's actually able to pick up a kill in the bottom lane. So used to Mule actually playing the off lane. Gatekeeper going to be hiding himself in the tree line for now. We do see a wraparound. This is the reason why you want an Observer Ward there. If you had an Observer Ward there, you would have seen Gatekeeper go into that tree line, so you know that he's hiding. You also would have saw the rotation coming from KQT, so Cherry wouldn't have taken death there. So case in point, if you're going for an aggro tri lane, if you want to place your tri lane against their safe lane, you always need to place a ward there for that exact reason. This wouldn't have happened if they had that ward there. This ward actually gives you nothing. Because you've got the aggro tri lane, because you're the aggressor, they're not going to be looking to gank you anytime soon. They're most likely going to be playing cautiously themselves, especially because Trident have the much greedier lineup. This is something they tend to do. So that macro mistake actually costing them a huge amount. They're actually losing a fair amount of momentum, especially since they're feeding kills and feeding experience towards Venado. He's a hero that's already got an inbuilt farming mechanism. Speaking of which, Novalar, great fissure ball coming out from Gatekeeper, might not be enough to go for the kill, unless if Mule's able to land one more coup de grace. Chris, he does have Blink Strike coming cooldown fairly soon, and looks like the creeps are coming in for that fun. Lucian, not able to get there in time. And Mule showing off that coup de grace. One of the things you can do in terms of mechanics for a Phantom Assassin is you can hit a creep once or twice once you get your ult, and if you don't proc the coup de grace, then you immediately throw out the Stifling Dagger and Blink Strike on the enemy hero. Because in terms of, since it's a pseudo-random ability, every time you don't proc the crit, you up your chances of proccing the next hit. So it basically assures you crit once every 4 or 5 hits. And since you get, I believe it's 4 attacks with Blink Strike, with the bonus 100 attack speed, you guarantee at least getting 1 crit, you might even get 2. That's, well, if it doesn't kill them, it's going to force them out of lane for a little while, force them to burn through their bottle charges, and in terms of the regen wall, that does give you quite a significant advantage, the fact that you force the enemy hero out of lane for even if it's 5-10 seconds. That's could effectively equate to entire waves worth of experience, especially if you're going to be prioritizing those denies, which mid players tend to do. Mule, 15 denies to his name. Pretty like an absolute champ. Venado going to be going for most likely the Ring of Aquila. He likes to go for Shadow Blade, something that I've noticed, at least in the game yesterday, so we might be seeing a Shadow Blade pick up on the Shadow Fiend. It has been buffed, so it does 175 damage now when you break it, Novalar. Taking a fair amount of damage. He is actually going for the conventional build, choosing max out the Witchcraft, then going in for next Q, then he'll opt to go for a point in the Exorcism. Very surprised he actually didn't opt to go for a point in the Grave Silence, since he is being constantly ganked by KQT as well as Gatekeeper. Since the Grave Silence has got a slightly lower cast point than the Fissure, so if you see a Shaker coming in with winding up with that Fissure, you can actually silence it before he gets it off. Cast shot coming through, saves KQT's bacon for now, but he's hanging around a little bit too long. Cherry just nips him with that Lightning Storm. Not going to be enough though. The fact that Lightning Storm now has that snare, there's also more reason why you should go for a point in Q. Diabolic Edict doesn't actually give you that much benefit for putting more points into it. You usually just want to keep 1 point in it, or you at least want 1 point in the split earth. So that's another reason why Leshrac is not finding as many kills as he'd like, because you already have, if you have 3 stuns in the Tri lane, especially since you've got the dumb stun of the Vengeful Magic Missile, following through with the split earth, massive amount of kill potential, not having that split earth, it's just leaving money on the table. Novalar, just barely staying alive, just to bite that dagger crit. And McCheesums takes that regen room from Mule. Mule's not going to be too happy with that one. Jumps on McCheesums, no crit coming out so far, but he's actually taken out half his life. He's got phase boost, there's the coup de grace, and that should be a kill coming in from Mule. McCheesums sells, but no Mule, no mercy. Runs him down. He is going to be going phase drum. Very standard build as far as the mid lane Phantom Assassin is concerned. If he wants to play a little bit more aggressive, could opt to go for the Cranium Basher as his first big item, just because the only thing Phantom Assassin really lacks is the ability to actually offload her damage. You don't really want to build damage from Phantom Assassin. It's the lowest priority that you need, since first of all you need survivability and utility, so you can actually get that damage out. Cranium Basher really fulfills that need. Lets you stick to targets and get those hits in. Since in most competitive games, Phantom Assassin's only hitting about 9 to 10 times every engagement, so you're only getting, I think the average as far as crits concerned is 8 to 12 crits per Phantom Assassin game, assuming a game is about 40 minutes. So you're actually not getting that many shots in the enemy heroes. That's why range carries do have that intrinsic advantage against melee carries. The time on target, the amount of time you're actually hitting them. Phantom Assassin makes up for this because you've got so much mobility with the Stifling Dagger slow as well as the Blink Strike. And so by going for an item like a Cranium Basher, since you get those 4 free hits in with that Blink Strike, you pretty much are guaranteed at least 1 bash when you Blink Strike on them. And so that's usually going to be enough damage for you to kill them. Also, you can build that towards the Abyssal Blade, which is probably one of the best damage items you could go for on the Phantom Assassin, aside from the Desolator. So Mule, it's going to be bottom crawling from the look of it. And we've got a hand of Midas flying out to Venado. So Venado, once again, going for some Arteezy level greed. Shadow Fiend, he's a great hand of Midas carrier just because he gets it so early, since you already have an intrinsic farming mechanism. Well, I say that. Looks like Jellysicle finds himself a kill, utilizing that Dream Coil. We do have both supports rotating in, or support as well as a core. Cherry, keep forgetting that Leshrac is actually run as the 1. As far as farm is concerned, he's actually not looking too crash short for net worth. Much lower than Death Prophet in the mid lane that had a dual lane in the first. Mule should be able to find a very easy kill. The Cherry can't do anything. He can try to stand his ground, Diabolic Edict. Actually, K comes in. He's got the Chronosphere not available for a few more seconds. The Mule should be able to disengage. While that's happening, looks like Jellystick will find himself another kill. Now going to be called out with that paralyzing cast. Chronosphere has actually been used. Should be an ensure kill on KQT. Never mind, the fish is there from Gatekeeper. Might not be enough to KQT. Resign himself to his fate. Mule's able to disengage from Novalar. No exorcism available just because he doesn't have the mana. Mule maybe looking to re-engage. He's bottling up. This is the added benefit in the mid lane and Phantom Assassin, the fact that you do carry a bottle, and just because Phantom Assassin, her abilities and her HP pool so low, you can actually restore surprising amount of HP and mana in the few seconds that you take that sip from that bottle charge. Venado, meanwhile, being left alone to his own devices, doing what he does best as a one position player, just gonna sit there, find some farm, maybe split push. Paralyzing cast twice through a gatekeeper, should be okay. KQT, he's been the one receiving the showdown just because he's a very fragile hero, and he did eat that entire Chronosphere. So K, every time you can get a kill with the Chronosphere, very worthwhile. So far, both his Chronos have resulted in kills. He is actually opting to go for the conventional build, so choosing to max out the Time Walk now that he's maxed out Time Lock to further increase his initiation range. He's got Master Lands from Marvel Spaghetti to help boost his damage. The reason why you want to prioritize attack speed over damage on the Faceless Void is because most of your damage for the first 20 to 30 minutes is actually coming from your Time Lock, since it does 140 magic damage every time it procs. So you actually get more bang for your buck by going attack speed as opposed to stacking damage. Of course, the drawback of that is if they want to pick up a BKB, you do lose the vast majority of your damage potential, so it's why some players actually like to rush Daedalus. While I say that, Cherry, been ganked on, Dreamcore not being used, not even needed now to find two Mystic Flare. Cleans up another one. Looks like Jellysickle did choose to commit it in the end. Not really too sure if that was necessary, but better safe than sorry, just because Dreamcore doesn't really have too big of a cooldown, so every time you get a kill with that, I'm more than happy to throw that one out. Mule in the mid lane. The nice thing about Trident's lineup is you've got two very powerful late game cores, and as far as overall DPS is concerned, Shadow Fiend works very well with Phantom Assassin, because Phantom Assassin is going to be the one in the front line, forcing you to deal with her, while Venado hangs back, smacking people around, getting his swagger on. It makes it very difficult for you to prioritize targets. You ideally want to go for Shadow Fiend, because Shadow Fiend's a squishier target, but in doing so, you leave yourself open for the Dream Coil coming in from Jellysickle, as well as Mule just being able to run in, run out, and wreak absolute havoc on your supports. Since Phantom Assassin excels at picking off backline heroes with the Cycling Dagger, as well as the Blink Strike ability, Cherry may be looking to play aggressive against Venado as he is out of mana. He is once again going for that Shadow Blade build. Blink Dagger, I suppose it's too much of a Dota 1 Yafet thing. Shadow Blade is actually very powerful in Shadow Fiend if you get it before the 20-minute mark, because A, you force the enemy supports to have to spend their gold on sentries and dust, you're keeping the poor, and it also does give you a fantastic amount of burst damage, which is something that Shadow Fiend excels at, since you now get 175 damage when you break that Shadow Blade. And since Shadow Fiend already hits like a truck as is, and has that presence of the Dark Lord, it does give you a lot more burst potential. Not really the greatest item as far as team fights are concerned, although I suppose it does give you a little bit of mobility, but it's more for the macro strategic advantage of A, forcing the supports to waste their gold, and B, it also does, if you do go for solo pickoffs, it gives you that avenue with Shadow Fiend. He really excels at in a one-on-one matchup, just because he hits so damn hard. He's probably going to come out on top, so long as he gets the first hit in. Mule, just going to be sitting there in the mid lane, actually just spent a good chunk of his gold. Probably what I'm going to be seeing the Cranium Basher, there we go. We've got the Javelin coming out from him. Could also go for the BKB if you want to play a bit more defensively, but the way Mule likes to play Phantom Assassins, you dart in and out. You're never the first one to engage, you always want to wait until they jump on somebody else. So in this case, it's going to be Jellysickle, but of course you've got two very mobile heroes that could potentially be the ones initiating. Jellysickle ideally goes in with the Waning Rough Dream Coil, then comes in Mule. By the time your spells are off cooldown or you're not silenced, Mule can actually Blink Strike out in time. Although he's actually choosing to prioritize Blur, so never mind, you'll only have Blink Strike to be able to engage, not to disengage. They have going on K, and K, Dream Coil, Waning Whip, and that's enough for Mule to be able to smack him down. Looks like Jellysickle actually took the kill on that one. Double Damager and also activated for that. McCheesums, he comes in, trying to avenge his fallen comrades. Cherry now caught in the line of fire, get torn down by Mule. Two shots in. Diabolic Edict actually almost kills Mule. They should be fine. We've got Novalau and the Death Prophet. Death Prophet's a hero that excels in the first 40 minutes. If you're not able to create space for your team in the first 20 minutes, you've had a terrible laning phase just because your hero is designed to win the laning phase. So you really can't play from behind as a Death Prophet. You do have the avenue of recovery just because you have such a massive in the team fight potential. But of course the issue is what happens when they can just burst you down. You're able to do so. This time taking kill from Jellysickle, so you take some, you lose some. And with that, now they're grouping up as 5. So your Trident, as far as overall team fights is concerned, they've got this spare initiation just because you've got the instant Blink Waning Rift, which is going to mess up K, since if K ever tries to initiate against the line of a Trident, he always has to be aware of both the Skywrath Mage and the Puck. Ancient Seal also has a 0-second cast point, and will disable Faceless Void from being able to use that Chronosphere. KQT, very experienced player. Believe he should have quick enough reflexes to be able to respond in time. Since Chronosphere, the biggest weakness of it is 0.54 seconds. For the wind-up, so you see Faceless Void wave his arms before he freezes time. You've got 0-second cast point on both Waning Rift as well as the Ancient Seal, so you've got 2 ways to reliably prevent him from get that chrono off. If you're able to do that even once, can potentially throw the tempo of the game back into your favor, just because it really messes up the team fight as far as CRT is concerned. Edge is the Immortal, not picked up in the Phantom Assassin. Actually very surprised they didn't give it to Venado, but I suppose since Venado is hanging back on the side, he's not actually fighting at the moment, unless if he considers creeps. I suppose Mule would be the superior choice for that. He now has that Cranium Basher. Might not even look to go for a BKB. BKB would be the logical next build, next item to build after you've picked up the Cranium Basher, because you have all the damage you need now, you've got all the utility, now you want a bit more survivability, so you don't get controlled in these engagements. With that being said, you do have the Exorcism and the Chronosphere, which will penetrate that BKB, as well as Diabolic Edict, since it does do a mix of magic and physical. Actually, I'm not too sure if it what damage type it does now that we've switched to. Well, I say that. Mule, and just breaks. Deathball actually ensures a kill on 1. Jelly Sickle backs off. He's able to ensure the kill on Death Prophet. And Mule, he's back for revenge. Wants to go on Cherry. Cherry Diabolic is wearing off. Does go for the split out to lands it. Might ensure his retreat, but we do see the concussive shot coming as KQT comes up from the side saying surprise motherfucker. Mule is able to find 1. Looks like Jelly Sickle finds 3 with that Waning Rift clean up. And Novalau, the only survivor, aside from K, who wasn't even present. He's just bailing. So he was able to smack a few creeps in the meanwhile. They did lose the Aegis, but more than happy to do so for those 3 kills. And Gatekeeper getting closer and closer towards the Blink Dagger. The reason why Shaker always takes the 4th priority, much like the Witch Doctor, is the fact that there are support heroes that do very well without items, but once they get one particular item, in Shaker's case the Blink Dagger, or in Witch Doctor's case the Aghanim Scepter, their damage potential skyrockets. So for Shaker, the Blink Dagger is more of a control item for him, just because it lets you really influence the team fight with the Blink Echo Slam. Since the stun time from the Aftershock as well as the follow-up Fissure, that's about 3 seconds of stun time just from those 2 abilities in conjunction with his E. Well, I say that Requiem comes out. Okay, very quick response, and Venado not going to be too happy with that. Since each wave of the Requiem counts as a separate instance of damage, Faceless Void's probably the worst target you could go on, just because of the backtrack, you increase the likelihood of surviving. Since it's multiple sources of damage as opposed to 1, and looks like it's a fantastic 2-man Chronosphere. Venado should be taking a death there with the Mouse and Minus being activated. KQT sending his ground, the Death Wall cleans him up. Very good recovery coming out from the boys in Crouton. They refuse to be crunched. Novalau, still no Yule Scepter though. Jelly Sickle being a little bit cheeky, eats that Lightning Storm. He's got the Blink Dagger coming online. He's got the Yule Scepter as well. He actually could have used the Yule Scepter to take off that Grave Shield Silence and then blink himself out, but didn't want to chance it, especially since you've got the potential Blind Fire stun on that Split Earth. Gatekeeper been giving a lot of free farm in that top lane. One actually being spelled out by KQT. A little bit annoyed at Gatekeeper, but I mean, this is what happens when you draft an Earthshaker. He's not going to be the one buying wards until he gets up the Blink Dagger. Once he gets the Blink, then you can chuck him back on ward duty, but until then, we can't afford to do so. Cherry, once again, gets cleaned up by Mule. Premium Basher, really paying out dividends on him. Looking to be going for what appears to be a Helmet Dominator. Could also go for Mask of Madness. Probably wouldn't recommend Mask of Madness, but knowing Mule, could be seeing some crazy pickups coming out from him. Got the conventional loader style build coming up from Faceless Void, so Mask of Madness into the Maelstrom. Also do see the Hand of Midas picked up from time to time, if you can get it fast enough. But this maximizes your damage potential, assuming they're not going to go for a BKB anytime soon. Since BKB of course blocks the magic damage component of Time Lock, so they still are stunned if they don't take that damage. And so this is going to be mathematically the most cost effective build as far as damage is concerned. If you were worried about them going for something like a BKB, or if you just wanted to, I suppose, diversify your damage so you're not so dependent on magic damage, if you're playing against a hero such as an anti-mage, then going for a Daedalus Rush build is going to be a lot more effective for your overall damage. But otherwise, Maelstrom into the Mjolnir, you can actually just choose to leave it at this, go for the BKB, then choose to upgrade the Mjolnir. So Faceless Void, fairly conventional build order. Witch Doctor, choosing to max out the Voodoo Restoration for himself with a little bit more utility. The first point always the most effective as far as mana for heal is concerned, but of course more points than it does for drastically increase your survivability. Most likely going to be going to look to go for the Aghanim Scepter if you could ever find the gold. So far hasn't really been too successful. Cherry actually going for the Ags Rush, and Ags has been quite heavily buffed. I think it was 8-2 where they buffed the Aghanim Scepter upgrade on Leshrac, so now it's actually a very worthwhile first item to build just because it gives you a massive amount of damage in these early team fights. Of course, the weakness of this is they could always stun you, they could always focus fire you. Do you usually see Leshrac players tend to go for something like a Blink Dagger or a BKB first before you go for an Ags, even though Ags is a lot more cost effective in terms of the benefit it gives you, just because you have to account for the fact that if you run at them with the Pulse Nova active, they're going to throw everything they have at you, they'll probably be able to kill you in time. Jelly Sickle actually going for a Dagon. So I suppose showing off how far ahead he is, especially the amount of kills he's received. Dagon's actually a very powerful pickup against this lineup because you've got both the Leshrac and the Death Prophet, two high priority targets that you always want to kill as quickly as possible, and that's what Puck excels at. It's the reason why you haven't really seen much Queen of Pain, at least until the recent patch. Puck basically does everything Queen of Pain does, but a lot better. The opposite is Puck does less burst damage, but he provides you a lot more utility and control. Queen of Pain gives you more damage and maybe a slightly easier laning phase because you've got that blinked in short runes, but the drawback of course is all you do is provide damage. So if they've got very tanky supports, like an Ogre, when you throw out that Sonic Wave, it's not going to instantly kill them. They can stand their ground and maybe try to turn things around. That's why you see Puck drafted more than Queen of Pain. They basically perform a very similar role, but Puck just provides you a bit more utility. Okay, it's actually able to catch on Mule, but Mule's probably the worst target to go on K. It's a trap since the boys on Trident. Looks like Nushin. Death Wall actually is cancelled by the Ancient Seal. Requiem not even used, Venado goes ham on 2. Should be able to kill 3 as well. Cherry, one more right click needed. Venado with non-spaghetti active, one more right click. You also have to be used for Jelly Sickle. He wants that kill, and he is actually able to steal it with that illusory orb. So they lose Gatekeep in exchange for 5, more than happy to do so, and Jelly Sickle showing off that Dagon, using it to great effect. Looks like it could actually even be a tier 3 tower. One thing you always have to be very cautious of when you're playing against a hero like a Shadow Fiend or a Drow Ranger is they're very powerful at pushing. Not because they provide you minions or they reduce armor, just because they hit very hard. So from that, they actually could be losing that tier 3 tower. They don't have fortifications available. And actually the core heroes won't be alive for a while. They could actually even lose a set of rats from this, because even if the Death Prophet does come back, they don't have the Exorcism available. Mule being very liberal with his drum charges to get 6 of them now. They actually are able to secure their first of the rest with 24 minutes in. The boys in Trident off to a fantastic start. It's going to be very difficult for Croutons to recover from this. So now we've got about 17,000, actually 17,500 EXP lead going to their hands. And then look at Gold Giver. Mule actually lifted up into the air. He could be the sacrificial lamb. KQT actually hanging by to make sure he can blink out. Now actually going to spell his doom, just because the silence was there. So great ancient, not ancient seal, grave silence coming up from Novalau. He picks up another one. KQT. Unfortunately, he was there to ensure that Mule could blink strike out. Didn't anticipate the silence. Paid for it. Venado just doing his thing with the Mask of Madness. So we are going to be seeing the Sing Sing build. Going to go for Daedalus. So once again, no BKB coming up from them. It's a great recovery just from those 2 kills. 2,000 gold as well as 3,000 experience. About a 2.8k gold shift from killing 2 heroes. This is what I'm talking about as far as comeback mechanic, just because it is calculated off a ratio. So if your net worth is disproportionately high in the enemy team, every time you lose a hero, even if you kill 2 or 3 of theirs, you're going to be throwing back so much more gold into their hands. Just try to balance things out. So in terms of overall gold deficit, about 17,000-ish. So 25 minutes in. If this was 8-1 or the TI4 era, this is actually be considered unwinnable for the boys in Crouton. It'd be something like a 92% win rate for the team that gets that far ahead this early on. Now, if Trident ever lose a single decisive engagement where all 5 of them get wiped without them being a fight to kill, they actually throw such a massive amount of gold back into Crouton's hands that they could actually recover from this. This game still is by no means over. Crouton, they're down, they sure as hell are out. Cherry might actually look to go for a BKB, probably wants to go for the BKB before going for the Ags. Ags at this point not really providing any benefit. K actually being jumped on, Wayne Rip's being used, Dreamfall actually being held on, there we go, there's Dreamfall. Dagon actually being disjointed by the backtrack. They stand their ground, the Mystic Flare is there, and Venado says, bitch please. He's lifted up in the air though, the Death Pulse and actually the Pulse Nova might be enough for the kill, and it is. Cherry finishes him off that Lightning Storm. KQT once again gets cleaned up, and Cherry actually finds 2. Just as I talk about the boys and Trident getting wiped and throwing a massive amount of gold into their hands, Mule though, he picks up the slack for his rest of the team. He 4-shots the Witch Doctor. Cherry, caught with the silence coming in from the wing, the BKB now being used, it's fresh BKB, Novalau could be taking a death. Looks like McCheesum's going to be the sacrificial lamb. Mule actually realizes, hang on, you're worth a bit more gold, I'm going to go for you instead. Novalau saying, please no. Mule, show mercy. And Mule, at least he's mute. He makes it quick. McCheesum as well runs back into it. Could have actually kept running and going towards the creeps, or just sacrifice himself to the neutrals. So I guess with that turnaround, they do get a significant amount of gold from those 3 kills they found. Not because they've had so much gold to Mule, since Mule pretty much killed 3 heroes on his own. I mean, for God's sake, he's the 19th highest ranked Phantom Assassin player in Dota2, so potentially the world. I think the first is actually Loader, so when you're outshined by Loader, not really the end of the world, he's a competitive player after all. They now lose their bot to the range rack, so the game becomes a lot more difficult for the boys in Crouton to recover from. That being said, by all means, if they ever are able to get a decisive engagement against Trident and wipe them, it does put them pretty far ahead, or will actually start to pull them back into the game. K is actually making a massive mistake. Aghanim Scepter, no longer worth it on Faceless Void. 9 times out of 10 Refresher Orb is always going to be a lot more effective on the Void, especially since The Chronosphere no longer disables passives. I believe actually if you upgrade to the eggs, it might disable passives. Not actually 100% certain with that upgrade. Just like Doombringer, it could actually be that. If so, that would be worthwhile. Otherwise, Refresh Orb is going to be a lot more effective. But the issue K is finding is that when he goes into the Chronosphere, he's actually dying inside his own Chrono because of Mystic Flare. So BKB would be the much more safer pickup, just because it ensures that you could actually do stuff in your Chronosphere and not get cock blocked by Gatekeeper. Funnily enough, who's going to be blocking you out with a Fissure, but the Mystic Flare coming in from KQT, which is going to blow you to pieces. Does go and blinked out, actually whiffs the Chronosphere. Fantastic reflex coming from Gatekeeper. Now K going to be jumped on by Mew, gets 4-shotted. Machine's fleeing for his life. Jellysicle, Dagon's down, the Death Prophet. Cherry coming into the fray. A little bit left, showing off that blink dagger. Might be to find one on Gatekeeper here. Actually does. Mule man fighting against him with a little bit of help coming in from his friends. And KQT with the Alpoop ensures that kill. It was 1 for 4 when that happens. Jellysicle a little bit overzealous of that when he really wants to find Mushin and Mushin. 3 Mask of Menaces on the enemy team. Should be taking a death. Actually 2, there's 3 in the game. So Mule going for the Mask of Menace as well as Venado. So just as I was talking about Mule going for the Helm Dominator, most likely going to be going for the Mask. So we sing now, boys. That 5-man white in exchange for 1. Actually, it hasn't actually properly calculated it. And it looks like the boys from Trident, they're just going for the effigies. So not even bothering finishing off the rest of the racks. So just going to go right for tier 4s. The only reason why you would ever want to do this in a competitive game is if you think it would take you less time to go for tier 4s than, say you only have 50 seconds to win the game before the enemy carry comes back alive. Otherwise, it's always going to be a lot more beneficial for you to try to close out the game by getting more racks. Mega Creep's much more difficult to recover from. But of course, tier 2 is still up in the mid lane. I suppose it could have gone for top. But I suppose this game is quite heavily in their favor. At this point, they can build whatever they want and still win. KQT going for the Dagon. Actually reminds me of a bit of a funny joke. Why is Dagon called Dagon? Because Dagon. So Jellysicle. Level 4 Dagon. We are going to be seeing a lot of Instagib coming out. People with the Mask of Madness. This is... I still can't really get over the fact he actually did this. Aegis now being given over to Venado because he's actually the one with the highest damage potential. While I said that Cherry comes in way too far and right, it's like it's torn to pieces with no BKB. Okay, actually called out with the Dream Coil stun. It's a very long stun duration. Mule, they're actually going to be taking a death there. Never mind. Blur 2 overpowered. Jellysicle finally takes a death from K. Sick of getting Dagoned in the face. Sick of getting that Waning Rift ruining his initiation. Trying to TP out. He should actually be able to make it. Venado going for some Yafet's plays, unfortunately. Vastly overestimating his damage potential. And Mule, that Death Ward missing the last few hits, kept him alive. RNG's is working out into his hands. That was a Yasha, so he's going to be going for, I believe, the Manta style. The reason for that is just the ability for you to be able to instantly self-purge off the silence coming in from the Death Prophet. Can be quite a critical factor. You can also dodge the Magic Missile coming up from Venge. Since it's very obvious with the Magic Missiles in the launch, since Venge, the only reason why she'd wave her hands like that is if she's shooting that Magic Missile at you. KQT? Okay, puts in a Dagon on the 5 position Skywrath Mage. He's actually got more net worth. He's actually got more net worth than the other 2 supports combined. Just about. Well, there's only a 2,000 net worth difference between the enemy mid and the enemy 4. Things are a little bit hairy. They're going to be taking in a second to the racks, and at this point, it's going to be very difficult for the boys in Croutons to recover. Swap actually coming on Venado. Venado says thanks for that, mate. Gatekeeper comes with a fantastic Echo Slam. Cherry wants to join into the fray with that pulse stone standing his ground, but Mule's going to cut him to pieces. Venado, he's got the Aegis, he doesn't really care if he dies. You'll set to be used in KQT. Back himself, and actually Mule gets cleaned up by that Crypt Swarm. So he is able to end that unstoppable streak. But Venado, he doesn't care if he's silenced, he's actually probably happy. He's doing more damage with right clicks than with spell usage. Novalau going for BKB as well, just to try to mitigate some of the magic damage coming out from the Tridents. Especially since the burst is real, especially coming in with the Dagon and the Ancient Seal. That 45% magic amp is no joke. Okay, just popping the monster, the Madness to be there to try and push up the creep wave. Still going in for the aggro, despite the fact that the issue isn't the Chronosphere. I mean, I suppose he did with that last one. The issue is the fact that even inside the Chronosphere, he's still getting killed. So you need to make sure that you don't get controlled and burst inside your own Chronosphere. Sneaking your Lich Jellysicle, once again, call inside the Chrono. Going to be very unfortunate. Keep himself alive, but now it will eventually be taking a death. That wastes the vast majority of that Chronosphere just to ensure that kill on Jellysicle. Venado, swapped in, just Shadow Blades out. 4-star comes through, keeping you alive for now. And BKB is finally being picked up. So Venado, putting on the serious pants, they are starting to throw a little bit, and every time they do die, they are feeding them certain amount of gold. 3.2k gold swing just from 2 kills. What's that? Fissure Stun, McCheesums. He picked the wrong day to pick support. especially as the Venge. It's basically ego death every time you take a Venge. You're expected to die for your carry, you're expected to die for pretty much everybody apart from, I suppose, the 4. Just because you've got that get out jail card with the Nemesis. Manstar not picked up by Mule. Does give him a good degree of offensive capability as well as defense, just because you can. You activate the Manstar to not only dodge spells, but also the purge off debuffs, such as the Silence, which tends to be the most popular way of controlling the Phantom Assassin, just because he has that BKB. So now he's got 2 very effective ways to keep himself out of a sticky situation. Also does split the amount of minions, so it splits the damage coming up from Diabolic Edict, since Edict is divided amongst the units in range. Although that being said, since Cherry will probably have Pulse Nova active at the same time, won't really absorb as much damage as you'd like. Trident Support's actually now choosing to upgrade the Dagon, so not even bothering to go for any remotely useful support items. I suppose in this case, when you're that far ahead, the additional damage actually does help you win more. Dagon is one of those funny items where if you get it and you're very far ahead, it just helps you win more, just because it lets you pick off targets a lot faster if the enemy support's very unfarmed, which in this case they are. It lets you start a fight 4v5 or even 3v5, just because you've got 2 sets of Dagon available on your team. So Witch Doctor, if he wants to stay alive remotely, just get his Cherry, you're gonna get 3-shot by Venado, not even needing the Fish's stun time. Venado, just saying bitch please, walks all over him, showing off his inner Yafets, despite not going for the blink. Now with the Daedalus available as well as present to the Dark One and the Shadow Blade, he's farmed as all hell. I believe Shadow Blade bonus damage won't actually be applied to a crit. So it was one of the, I think it was because it was bugged with the Bounty Hunter Shadow Walk. So there was a bug where you could do like an absurd amount of damage if you activate Shadow Blade with the Janada. So that's been patched out.
Radiant's middle barracks have fallen.
Janada, just slow siege on his own. He knows that with the BKB and the Mask of Madness, he could kill anyone that tries to fight him. Also knows that he's got enough HP that can't immediately burst him down. McCheesums gets killed by this Mystic Flare coming in from KQ2. No mercy being shown by the Friend Zone Megas. 2-man Dreamcall being used. Overlord pops his BKB though, standing his ground against Jelly. Jelly is able to do as much damage as possible. K time walking out, so he's not actually able to get off the Chronosphere. While it's happening, Venado is able to find one on Overlord. K catches up his teammates as well. You'll scepted into the air. This is why he needs a BKB. It's not the issue of the Chronosphere, it's the issue of actually being able to do something inside that Chrono. Novolode buying back. He doesn't have the Exorcism though. Death Prophet without the Exorcism, absolute shadow of himself. Jelly Cycle's gonna die to the Pulse Nova, but he does throw out the Dagon while it's happening. K stun locked to all hell by Gatekeeper. GG well played, being called for game number 1. And 35 minutes in, the boys and Trident off to a fantastic start. 19 for 46. They are able to close out the first game in great success, so we will be taking a quick break and we should be right back. If we want to have a look at the analysis for why this game was the way it was, it really does boil down to the fact that Cherry didn't go for the split Earth at level 1 split, or at any point in the laning stage. If you're going to draft an aggressive tri-lane, A, you need an aggressive ward play so you can spot TP rotations coming in, which is what actually got Cherry killed. B, you actually want to draft or build your hero in an aggressive manner, so having the additional stun from the split Earth. K actually did it pretty well. The only issue with him was the fact that he didn't go for that BKB. So the Aghanim Scepter did absolutely nothing. Had he had a BKB in lieu of the Aghanim Scepter, or even in lieu of the Maelstrom, just because every time he chronoed, you die inside this chrono. When you see that happening, you immediately say to yourself, I need a BKB. Just because otherwise we're going to get cock blocked by the Shaker, by the Puck, and we get blown apart by the Mystic Play. You need a way to shrug that off so you can actually do what you're meant to do, which is to kill people inside the Chronosphere. So we will be taking a quick break, and we'll be right back for game number 2. Stay tuned.